Your Highness, you're the Imam of the Shia, Imami, Ismaili Muslims. It's a hereditary title. Have you ever felt burdened by being sort of, you're the 49th hereditary Imam, you're a direct descendant from the Prophet, you became the Imam at the age of 20. Did it ever come up for you? Were you a reluctant Imam in any way?
A hereditary office is a hereditary office, and every member of the family has known that, so that concept of burden isn't there. The concept of opportunity, yes. It is a very special opportunity to be able to serve a community which I would define as an admirable community, widely spread internationally, and succeeding a man like my grandfather, who was I think a rather unique leader.
You work out of France and half an hour from Paris. Where is a sense of home for you? Where do you feel anchored?
Well, I've had a strange life because I was, my early childhood was in Kenya. Then my education was in Switzerland, the United States. Then I returned to Switzerland after I finished my education. Then I established myself in France. So in terms of work, the work happens wherever I am. And as I travel a minimum of 4 months a year, and probably more than that, the work is where I am. I suppose the children would consider France as their base. They've spent more of their lives there than elsewhere. So in that sense, yes, I suppose that would be the home.
Your interests are diverse. I think many of us are familiar with your initiatives in development support.
Yes.
But you breed thoroughbreds, you have an interest in tourism, a whole range of interests. Isn't that sort of an unlikely profile for an Imam?
I think that may come from a non-Muslim perception rather than a Muslim perception. I think that in Islam, right from the time of Prophet Muhammad, there has been a compatibility between the faith and the world in which the faith is practiced at any given time. And I'm not willing to make any compromise on that compatibility. I'm not willing to accept that other notions of the relationship between the world and faith should be imposed on a Muslim or an Islamic interpretation. So I have no discomfort. On the contrary, I have very great conviction in it. And I believe that most Muslims have that and believe in that compatibility. Indeed, probably the most common statement about Islam is that it is a way of life. It's not just a faith, it is a way of life. I inherited effectively things from my family which, for one reason or another, I've continued to carry on, such as the thoroughbred activities, such as personal investments. But I have no discomfort with any perceived dichotomy, very much the contrary.
Are you despairing of the turmoil that much of Islam seems to be in?
The world is very much influenced by the way a faith or a community communicates. And I think that there is a very great gap. The vast majority of Muslims today live in a rural environment. They do not communicate. They are peaceful people. The perceptions that one has of polarization and things of that sort are much more urban forces, urban expressions. And if you were to ask me today whether the vast majority of the Muslims participated in any way in this polarization, I would answer probably not.
Your efforts and initiatives in the areas of development have been unique, in the context of the secularism, in a sense, that you employ people of all communities, nationalities, and many of your development initiatives reach out to people of all faiths and backgrounds. Where did the impetus for that worldview come from for you?
Essentially in my belief in the message of Islam, which is that you must not impede or damage or do anything to hurt the people amongst which you live. On the contrary, you seek to build relations with them and uphold their quality of life. And indeed, you mentioned just now this issue of polarization. One of the ways to polarize societies is to divide them. And I think that, on the contrary, anything that can be done to bring them together, to develop common objectives in improving their quality of life is perfectly acceptable. That doesn't mean that individuals don't practice their faith. That is their right.
There is the perception that sections of Islam are, let's say, intolerant of other faiths. We've already talked about your essentially secular approach and philosophy.
Yes.
What is the Islamic position on other faiths and relationships with other faiths?
Well, I think we are experiencing a time of, in a sense, the search for a legitimacy in the interpretation of Islam in relation to the modern world, in relation to modern society, in relation to non-Muslim societies. And in that search, there are all sorts of interpretations being put forward. I personally am very cautious about seeking a formalistic approach, because I think that one of the great risks, apart from the fact that it does tend to deny individuality, which is of course something strongly upheld in the Islamic faith, is the fact that it tends to anchor a faith in one time. And that is one aspect of my faith which I would never accept. I would never accept that the concept of Islam, the practice of Islam, cannot be fulfilled in the modern world or in the world of tomorrow.